Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One of the things that psychedelics really helped me open up within myself is the subject of intimacy, not only with my partner, but also with myself. Being able to be intimate with myself, check in to see what I need on a daily basis, and then base my workload and schedule off of that initial morning check-in has allowed me to stay out of the burnout zone and stay at the top of my game. Today's guests on the show are a man and woman who are intimacy experts and erotic entrepreneurs. Their mission is to help guide their clients deeper into pleasure by teaching that our experience of having a body is meant to allow us to create, prolong, and enjoy the totality of possible sensations available. Therefore, I feel confident in saying that this episode is going to be a very fun, intimate, and enjoyable ride. So please help me in welcoming Matthew and Maggie Spear to the show. What's up, guys?
Hey.
Hello.
So excited to have you both on. This is awesome.
I'm even more excited after that intro.
I know.
Yes. That's always my job. Like I originally learned this or saw it on Impact Theory where Tom Bilyeu was just so good at giving intros that the guests get fired up and they get to remember a lot of the things that they stand for. And so I took that from him and roped it into my own way of doing it. And my mission with it is always to allow the guests to remember all the wins they've had too, and remember how far they've come, because I think I speak for every entrepreneur listening and you guys too, that a lot of times when we're paving our own paths and we forget about like how much we've done to get to where we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I love the concept of really when someone commits to something or when you commit to something, firing them up.
Yes.
It's exciting when you don't want to come into something and be like, I just purchased something or I just decided to come on to something and then be like, okay, we've started, and not feel that energy. I think I always work on that too. It's am I bringing that same energy? So I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Energy alchemy, that's, I think, what we're talking about here. And, the ability to act as energetic beings from one another or for one another and help one another charge each other's batteries, right? I have this notion that I talk about in, my daily life, which is, are you going to be a battery charger or a battery drainer, right? And, I know that I think I speak for all of us when I say that we've come across both types of people, and not to judge or anything, because a lot of times people are unaware of what they don't know, but, to use discernment and be able to say, hey, I like to be around people who charge my battery. And so I'm feeling so charged having you guys on. I'm so excited to jump in with you on this. And, I feel a really good place to start, right? We were chatting before we hit record about, where you're at now and how that was spawned by a plant medicine experience. And so I'd love if you could take us through that, because, for me, I find that with the Theyre program and all these things that a lot of our age groups were brought up with, right? It's always an interesting story to find out how people first said yes to a psychedelic, right? Because they had to go against the norm. They had to be a trendsetter, instead of a trendsetter. They had to do a couple things that were different. So I love getting in the heads of people that said yes to that, said yes to themselves, and then taking us through what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, we probably both should share that. It's two different.
With a lot of parallels, which has been kind of a cool part of our journeys before we came together, was dancing in very similar realms. And then, finding that alignment once we fell in love too.
Yeah, so I would say a big part for me was that context is my dad's a Southern Baptist preacher and my mom's a teacher there. And so I had smoked a little bit of weed in college, and it was a party drug. And I started hanging out. I would say it was 3 years ago or 2 years ago. I had just left my real estate fund. My brother had passed away. And I was like, I'm tired of doing things for money. I'm looking for something that's going to give me purpose and fulfillment. And then the universe brings in someone who I really thought was weird. Really weird. And he was just him and his partner and their two kids. We started hanging out and we developed this pretty deep relationship. And I remember like him talking to me about smoking weed and just like I would do it around him, but he was like, he could tell there was something off in my energy. And he was like, you don't really know many successful people who smoke weed or do drugs, do you? No, to be honest. And he was like, yeah, you're still living in Muggle land. And there's a
Yeah.
whole world of wizards out there that are using this to upgrade their life. And I was like, okay, that and blew my mind. And there was like this kind of philosophy that I thought about of like that, 65% of people like use drugs and like abuse drugs. And then there's this, and that's where that reputation comes from. And then there's that 35% that like is really, and maybe even like 5 or 10%, I'm giving it.
Yeah. You're being generous.
That really use it to upgrade their life. And so like I remember smoking and just like going into this super depressed stage. And I was like, I don't like smoking because I always go here. I'm paranoid. And I was in that state and was like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I don't want to be high anymore. I don't want to feel this. And was like really like seeking to like get out of that state. Like, can I just let this wear off? What can I do to like lessen the effects of it? And eventually I like came to myself and was like, there's nothing I can do besides change my state.
Yes.
And so I sat down and started meditating and like realized that like the plant did nothing. It was literally me.
Yeah.
It was bringing me into alignment and in tune with my own internal energetic state. And I had the ability and choice at that moment to change my own frequency. And so that was like the start of like my own process of elevating my energy. And I would say a big part of it was like this wake and bake for a little while of like, I would literally wake up, smoke, and sit there and spend time elevating my state. And I would first come into resonance of what is my frequency. And then like, as soon as I tuned into what the frequency was, like what's coming out of my mouth, what's coming into my thoughts. And it's like, oh, another day, let that go. Oh shit, I got to work today. Let that go. And then I would find that it would neutralize until I eventually like blanked out. And I'm like, there's nothing here. Like there's not any more thoughts coming to me. And at that point, when nothing else came to me, I was like, shit, now I get to create my own reality.
Yeah.
So I really like, I explain it as like, it's like watching a movie and we're really this actor in the movie. And then as we get older, we step into kind of this observer role where we're observing that like, hey, there's a projector behind us. And what is that like light that's coming down that's projecting? Like, what is the movie that I've created? And then as we observe it for a little while, we actually grow up and realize, hey, like we can change the movie that's playing and create our own movie that's being projected out that we get to act in. And so I spent a lot of time in that place, changing my frequency and tuning my feelings to raise them so that I could actually create. And that's where a lot of the beginning of my journey began with awakening, is just the thought that I have a choice.
That is amazing, man. And I wrote a lot of notes, but I want to give Maggie a chance too to tell hers before I take us on a tangent.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to touch on two things of what Matt said before I share mine, because we haven't mentioned it yet, but we have this modality that we co-created or that kind of came through us together called spiral cymatics, which I'm sure we'll share about more. And a lot of it is like really understanding what Matt was just describing. And where it comes into the work we do with intimacy and sexuality is like all of that has to begin from intimacy with the self. And from that self-intimacy, then anything is possible. We can create anything. We can be any relationship dynamic. And so it's kind of like how it all weaves together. I think I was hearing a lot in what you shared in your story.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? I wanted to stop by while I had your ear and share a very special announcement with you. You may have heard people say that we are facing an epidemic of loneliness in the world right now. We believe that this is only half of the story, and that the real epidemic and the root of feeling loneliness is a lack of connection. Do you want to connect to more purpose and passion with the important work you are doing? Do you wish you had closer friendships with people who understand you, listen to you, and are truly present with you? Are you wishing you and your partner could move deeper into love together? The connection in all of these areas comes down to the one most important element of connection: the ability to connect with yourself. If you are ready to see change in your life, if you are ready to feel differently when you wake up in the morning, if you are ready to step into the life you envision for yourself, the first and only route to making these changes is settling in, quieting down, and being able to connect to yourself. Now, this can be a major challenge in today's world with media, culture, and other energies that pull us out of our ability to connect. When you've tried fitness, meditation, and other self-development practices and still find yourself feeling alone and lacking connection, you may be feeling out of options and wondering if you'll ever be able to tap into your full potential that you know deep down is possible in your life. What we have found in working with our clients is that plant medicines, and cannabis in particular, can guide us in having the experience of what true connection looks and feels like. In this way, cannabis can act as a rite of passage for connection and a gateway toward the spouse, tribe, mission, and life you know you are ready for. Now, the pitfall here is that many people become codependent on the medicines, such as cannabis, and expect the medicine to do the work for them. If this continues, what will happen is the user will find themselves reaching for more and more cannabis to feel connection, without taking ownership of their role in the outcome of their experience, and thus they will fall into repeating the same painful patterns. As Zen Buddhism teaches, how you do anything is how you do everything. Therefore, if this painful pattern is showing up in your relationship with cannabis, it is likely a reflection of the same patterns you're experiencing in your friendships, romantic relationships, business, and your relationship with yourself. Learning to work with cannabis effectively will supercharge your experience and will help you get the result you are actually seeking, which is connection. We created a program to support seekers and high achievers like you in doing exactly this: to learn how to work with the healing power of cannabis to connect you back to yourself so you can unlock purpose, passion, and creativity in all areas of your life. What this program will give you is the long-lost user manual for cannabis. This user manual will teach you how to connect with cannabis correctly so that the plant can act as your spiritual aid and ally in life, just as our ancestors understood and practiced. If you're ready to unlock the full power of cannabis, meet like-minded people on the same path as you, build more purpose into your life, and have the most fun doing homework you've ever had, this message is for you. To learn more and qualify for your spot in the program, hop over to our Instagram profile at highly.optimized and book a discovery call. The conscious cannabis revolution is here. Will you be joining us? Sending all of you love. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, so my journey, let's see, I grew up in a very Christian home in Texas. I was never enrolled in Theyre, but there was a lot of stigma around substance abuse, a lot of fear. And I have a lot of addiction in my family, including one of my uncles who was quote unquote addicted to LSD, right? Which is, a psychological thing more than anything.
He must have been a fun person to hang out with.
Yeah. A curious one.
Yeah.
And so I kind of was in this, reality for a long time of like, I'm not touching any of that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
And similar to Matt, I smoked some weed in college and it was like party fun. Like I was really good at studying when I was high. So I'd like get high and read. But it was never like something that was a big part of my life. And then I was living in San Francisco, and I was really in like what I would call a healing crisis. Like my life was really fun in a lot of ways. It was like successful, working at Google, like going to a bunch of festivals and having that, while also like in a super toxic relationship. There was a lot of stuff like happening in my family that was unhealthy and like surfacing, and I felt very lost within myself. And I was at Burning Man in 2014 and with a group of friends, and they're like, hey, do you want a candy flip? I'm like, that sounds fun. Like, what does that even mean? You know,
like, I like candy.
Yeah, I like candy. And so we did this. It was Tuesday afternoons, like no one was on playa yet, and we did this candy flip art tour, and it was hilarious. Like, it was this liquid LSD called Orange Sunshine, I think, is like, you know, super like clean, crystalline, like the original 1969, like, and I took it in like a 1960s purple tour bus. Like that was like my friend's bus. I mean, it was like this whole experience, you know, and this guy named Purple, who was like in his 70s, like drops it on my hand. We all lick it off together. It's just like, just that moment was so wild.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But what ended up happening was like on this art tour, there was this shamanic healer who was journeying with us. And I'd had some body work done from him earlier in the day. I had a lot of stuff surfacing through the body work. And so once the medicine kicked in, I was like right back in that space.
Mm-hmm.
I was like enjoying the art, and, you know, like I kept seeing specifically like this purple hexagon that would like flash in my vision a lot. But I had this moment where I got like, I mean, there's so much to tell about this journey, but this one part in particular, like the sensation in my body was so overwhelming. And so I was like, I need to lay down. And there was this like copper pyramid at this camp, and called Trifecta. And the journey started in a camp called Merkaba, right? So it was like working with the Merkaba in this triangle. And then the shamanic healer like was holding my feet. My partner at the time had my right hand, and a friend of mine, another man, had my left hand. So they were like anchoring the other part of the Merkaba.
Yeah.
And I essentially had an out-of-body experience where I left body. And it took a lot of deep breathing and a lot of surrender. I was very afraid that that would happen to me if I did this.
Yeah.
And of course it did, because... And what happened was I started like, I felt myself lifting up out of my body kind of from the heart and traveling down this tunnel of like, I describe it as white prismatic light, where it was just like I was in a prism. And then the light started to take the shape of breasts and nipples. And I was like hysterically laughing, and also like, what the fuck is going on? Why am I in a tunnel of nipples?
Yeah, it's like, where did you get this acid again? I need some of this.
And then those morphed, and they became faces, and it was the faces of all of the women of my lineage, like all of my grandmothers, you know, thousands of women.
Wow.
Like it kind of like pulled into that, and then just into like the light, into like the void of light, and then essentially like snapped back into my body.
Wow.
And the message that really came through that was like around the healing that I needed to do, and how much healing I needed to do for myself and for my lineage. And so as like beautiful and powerful and fun as it also was like, you know, opening the door to a lot that wanted to unfold. And essentially that experience led me to ayahuasca, which I worked with very, very devotedly for 5 years. I did three diets through the Shipibo tradition, and sat in a lot of ceremonies, and I healed a lot. And a lot of what was surfacing, what I was really working with, was sexual trauma that I experienced as a child, but also sexual trauma that had been perpetuated in my lineage.
Mm.
And where that kind of all came around to is in the work that Matt and I shared together. What I spoke to, which is like intimacy with self, and then really like reclaiming power through our connection to sexuality and reclaiming our power as creators, reclaiming our power as sovereign beings, and understanding how much is sort of wound up in the sexual energy and how much is available to heal there. So I'm like so grateful to the plants. I've worked also with wachuma and mushrooms as I've been on that healing journey. And they all bring like a different consciousness and lens to really understand and see these things on a deeper level and also through another perspective. So rather than living in like the victim of what happened to me, I can see like how it was all created to arrive at this moment here and now.
Mm. Yeah, it's all perfect. There's nothing that's inherently wrong so long as we don't look at it as quote unquote being wrong. Right. And I'm really glad you brought that up because that can be such a challenging concept for some people. Like, what do you mean? It's not, it's not something I should be, feeling like a victim about. And how I usually put it to people is like, listen, it's your life. And if looking at the story in the way of you being the victim and being helpless in that, if you really believe that's helping you, then do that. But in most cases, especially in my case, and it sounds like in both of your cases as well, like looking at the events of our lives as happening to us rather than for us, just disempowered me. And it seems as though if you continued or if you chose to have it, happen to you rather than for you, that it would have disempowered you as well. And ultimately not led to you guys being able to create this modality and help other people go through that healing process as well. And that's one of the most important things that a lot of people that go through hardships that I work with, I talk to them about. I say, listen, these things help you become relatable to other people that are going through these things. As someone who's gone to therapy and been talked to by a therapist who isn't experiencing what I'm feeling, it's a lack of connection. That's what it felt like to me in that situation. Whereas if I have someone who's like, I know exactly what you've gone through and I've gone through that too, it helps me actually realize, oh, okay. And it helps the sun come out behind the clouds. That's the way I like to look at it. And, it sounds like in both of your journeys, especially with cannabis, right? Like, cannabis is something that I specialize in and it's a tool that is so widely misused and misunderstood, right? It's like in the industry, there's a lot of talk about, smoke every day. You can't get addicted. It won't give you cancer, all these things. And it's so interesting to me, having gone through a lot of, spiritual healing myself and now coming back to cannabis in the last couple of years and, totally revamping my relationship with it. And, one of the things that I believe, Matt, you were mentioning was that you realized that cannabis didn't give you anxiety. It wasn't the plant that did it. It was already there. Right. And that's like, one of those things again, where you could see it as happening to you, like, oh, cannabis gave me anxiety. But what I always tell people is like, how much power does that allow you to have in your life if you think you're helpless to things happening to you? And so I love to chat about that subject of, cannabis as a mirror because it can teach us so much, but, oftentimes it's looked at, Bob Marley, this kind of stuff, and it can be a very challenging plant to work with. Right. And because it will give you a very neutral look into your own life. Right. It won't try to cradle you if you're using it intentionally and you're interacting with it in a way that's going to allow those feelings to come up. It will bring them to the surface and allow you to look directly at them. And that's really funny,
Yeah, I'd say two things there that like really popped in my head is one, like you're talking about like the experience, just being like how to look at that experience. And like I had a mentor who's kind of a strange fellow, but really an oracle who really, I believe, like just came here and is clear and doesn't have like all these different experiences of trauma manipulation or whatnot. Somehow like is just this weird fellow. Anyway, kind of shared with me that like, you are different from me because you've had these experiences. I take people to a certain place and that is the place I take them to because I'm clear and I can take them to that place.
Yeah.
You're able to actually come and be with people through different experiences because you've had those experiences. He also let me know at that moment that I would be experiencing a whole lot of other things over the next 2 years. He's like, and you'll be able to relate to people at places that you've never experienced at this point, which is just like a powerful thing, right? So now I can say, yes, I've experienced poverty. Yes, I've experienced like my bank account, like being at a place where I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to pay the bills. Yes, I've also experienced like having 3 kids and a 4th one on the way. And like going through that process of like, how are we going to find the time to actually create something? And I think like having that experience now, I can relate to someone and actually show them that you can have an empowered approach in those situations, that you don't have to be the victim of your circumstance, that you can actually step into the creator in those situations. And I would say the second thing that really came to me was a second process that I had where I was smoking. I actually was in a deep meditation, and I kept on going to the point and was really using, I would say, psychedelics as a way to avoid my own pain and my own trauma. And so I had got to the point where I had essentially experienced so much bliss that I left body, and I blew out my nervous system. And was at the place where I had no feelings, no thoughts, no emotions. Like if someone could be the most like gone person, like,
great
I
state.
was there and was experiencing nothing. I was writing a book, and prior to that meditation, and I was sitting there just like nailing all these topics, and I was like, man, I'm really like tuned in right now.
Book is going to be done in 3 hours.
And afterwards, when I sat down, like out of the meditation, I didn't really know what had happened, right? Because when we change states, we're a lot of times not aware of the state that changes until we begin to be attuned to state changes. And so I was in this place, and I'm sitting down trying to write, and I couldn't even write a sentence. And it was because I had lost all polarity, all tension. And I was in this place of like, does this feel good? Does that feel good? And I didn't know. So sometimes we describe this like polarity being bad, but polarity is literally the boundaries of the universe that allow for us to exist and have feelings that allow for us to create what we want. And so to follow on that, like I didn't smoke because I was literally afraid of weed for the next
I don't blame
months. I don't know if I want to leave body again.
Yeah.
And I came to this experience where I was sitting there and I did smoke. And when I did, I literally sat outside or maybe it was smoking or mushrooms. Either way, I was in this experience and was like literally experiencing myself wanting to stab myself with a knife. And I stayed outside and was like, I don't know what this is. I know this is something that like has been going on for like, I guess, an earlier part of my life, but was really like attuned to the anxiety and like the panic and the fear that I was feeling. And I think what was happening the first time when I was, the first part of the stories was like changing and like tuning your mental state. But then at that point, when I had left body, I was really in this emotional state place where I was tuning my emotional frequency. And I tried mentally to keep myself in a certain frequency. And I was like pissed at that Law of Attraction book with whatever.
Asking it shall be given.
Asking it shall be given. I was like, she keeps on telling me just to maintain a certain thought. And I'm like, nothing's freaking working. I'm not attracting anything. Yeah. And in that point, I really had this moment of realizing all the anxiety, all the fear, everything that I was experiencing when I smoked was not actually because of the smoke. It was because I was like, oh, wait, this is where my emotional state is. And it's really important that we not just are tuning that mental frequency, but also that emotional frequency, because that's how we actually come into coherence and create the reality that we desire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to speak to that too when we were talking about like the victim consciousness and like working with plants to heal. Something I'm very passionate about because I have gone so far out in my journeys is integration.
Yes.
And really grounding back in everything that we learn and experience and go through with psychedelics into this like physical human bodied reality.
Yes.
And, you know, Matt speaking, there's the mental body, the emotional body, there's the spiritual body, and then there's like our physical body. And the physical body is where, specifically trauma gets trapped and stored. And so in that integration process, as we're moving out of victim, I've found that it's so important to address all of those different layers of the self. Right? It's like maybe the psychedelics like bring us like deep spiritual healing. And we're like, this totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And then it brings like deep mental healing. We're like, okay, reprogrammed all the thoughts. And like maybe we have enough catharsis, right? But like the emotional body also comes into check. But there's something that's really potent about actually honoring the human experience of like, I was in a body and this thing happened to me and it really hurt me. And like, how do I like hold myself through that and honor, not as a victim, but as, someone who experienced something, honor that so that I can then step into my power and move into that seat of creator.
Yeah. Everything you guys just said, I agree with so much. And, it brought on to me like a couple notes I wrote down were, really, this is why I feel it's so important to have awareness, an awareness practice first off, right? Whether that's meditation, breath work, different, therapies, things like that, so that you actually can get deep enough to understand what you actually are looking for in these plants, right? Like one of the biggest challenges I've seen with so many people, you mentioned music festivals too. And, I happen to be born and raised in music festivals as well. And so, one of the things I notice is this like pissing contest, specifically with things like LSD at music festivals. And, this is like a funny thing that I thought one time, which is interesting. And basically it's that I found myself for a while when I'd go to music festivals, I would be in a sober state, right? A state where I'm able to walk around, talk to people, be a functioning human. And then I would find myself taking something like LSD and then trying to be as normal as possible because the unconscious belief was like, oh, I can't lose my shit, right? Like, and, kind of negations, can't. But it was just very funny to me after a while. Like I think it was during a mushroom journey that I finally started cracking up laughing about it because they're like, what are you doing? Like, you're relinquishing your normal lease on reality when you interact with these medicines. And then you're trying to force yourself to stay inside the box. And then you're giving yourself anxiety because you might laugh a lot or you might, forget someone's name or, whatever might happen. And so it was really funny, and I think that's like one of the things I valued about the plants so much is that they will definitely teach you and they will show you things that can be really challenging to see. But if you're willing to move through that and have faith in it, at every end of every challenging ceremony, there's the consciousness of that plant, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's LSD, whether it's, peyote, whatever, kind of has a good laugh with you. And it's like, remember when you thought this? Yeah, that was like, yikes, huh? Like, and it's really funny to me. And that's why, and one of the main reasons I made this show was to have stories like this, out there where people can realize how much more beneficial and how much more you can get and gain from an experience when you actually go into it consciously and you have some sort of intention and you have an integration method after, and you have, kind of your house in order before you go in there, not to say that things can't go to shit and you can have your house fall down and that's perfect as well. But at least understanding what you're looking for in that, you mentioned the emotional body. And, that was one for me that the last big mushroom journey I went on, I knew I was harboring a lot inside of me. And I knew that for some reason, it was like an iron fortress in there. Like I needed to control alt delete in a way, right? There was too much processing going on and, or rather not enough processing, but too much mental processing, not enough emotional processing.
Right.
And I was psyching myself. I'm like, do I even remember how to cry? Like, what is crying like? And then I remember I was on this mushroom journey and I was completely connected. I mean, you guys know exactly where I was at, the complete flow, getting all the answers to all my life's questions, all that. And my girlfriend is like going farther and farther out, right? And we're laying in the bed together. We usually will just listen to frequency healing and kind of just meditate through the experience. And so I'm looking at her and she's kind of off in her own experience. And I'm just like talking out like, yeah, do you remember this? And she's like, oh yeah, sure. And she's not really listening. And so then I end up having this thought pop into my head and I go, laughter is a lot like crying. And then the second that left my mouth, all of a sudden I felt some key enter a lock and I just bawled my eyes out for like, I would say a good hour. And it was like in that moment, I bawled for like my father passing. I bawled for my mother getting older. I bawled for the identities that I had shed. I bawled for, like friends I had lost, people that had passed away. Everything started coming out. And I remember just holding myself, like literally basically digging my fingernails into my sides, hugging myself so hard, just, telling myself it was okay. And, it was so amazing because after that, I mean, everything changed for me. And coincidentally, I didn't feel as though I needed another experience for quite some time. and so, it's interesting to me because, in my case, I didn't necessarily know the signs that may or may not be there, that I needed some healing work. And, knowing that you guys, have done a lot of this and have worked with ayahuasca and plants like this and different, shamans, I'm curious, when you're working with clients or when you're checking in with yourselves, what are some signs that someone might be having in their life that may say that they need some healing work, and whether or not that's actually going to be done through plant medicines or not, whatever, but what are some signs that someone might need some healing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, let's take it back to the plants and I'll answer the question. There was this one time that I was at an event, and this was like deep in my, like early in my journey. And I really was like in ego, and someone randomly like pulled out some medicine, and I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And as soon as I did it, there was someone right in front of me who was one of the most successful people I had ever stared at. And I suddenly got really, really paranoid and was like, oh man, what am I like going to say to this person? She's coming to talk to me. And I'm like, reach out my hand and like start this conversation. And she asked me a question, and I'm like sitting there looking at her, and I'm staring at her, and like, I'm just noticing how beautiful she is. And I forget what the question was that she asked me. And I'm like, oh no, I'm making a dumbass out of myself. I'm literally here in front of this person, and I'm blowing a chance, an opportunity to like talk to her. And I like just was like straight up, I was like, I have no idea what you said. I just smoked. And she's like, that's cool. I'm in that place too. I'm totally enjoying the journey. Isn't it amazing how present the plants bring you, that you even forget someone's name or the situation that happens because you're present with what's here now? And I really think you say, what are the signs that someone's experiencing? And what we look for is two things. We really call spiral cymatics the modality of presence and manifestation. So a lot can happen when we're in this like wounded state where we're living in the past. And we really are like in the wounding and not in a place of like being fully present with what's going on in the world. And everything that we're doing is being looked at through the lens of our trauma. And then we get to this place where we like on the other side of that are living in the future. And it's like this place of like, oh yeah, I'm going to create this $1 billion business, or I'm like I want to do all these cool things. And it's like actually lacking manifestation power. And they're actually exerting the energy to create something on like speaking something that's like not actually being done. And people, what I have found is like in the present moment is where all creation happens. And there's so much power to coming back to that sensation. And so why we do so much work with intimacy and sexuality is because a lot of my journey and a lot of Maggie's journey as well, I'll just share me, was like, I would literally come into a situation where I needed to take action and reach out to people and like begin to build the business. And then I would go into that fight or flight. And in a sexual situation, that I call that either ignore the feelings that are coming up because we've been taught not to be aware of what's going on in the body because the body's bad, or release that sensation. And that led to me making a lot of bad choices as well, which is like have sex, like run away from what you're actually trying to do. And what we're really trying to do is bring presence to what we're currently feeling. And what we've classified as emotion is really just energy and sensation. And when we can be really attuned to what the sensation that we're feeling in the body is, then we don't have to necessarily change that sensation, which is what I originally kind of thought, which is like, hey, I want to change this thought so I can elevate my frequency. Actually, the frequency that I'm feeling is fine. Mm-hmm. I just need to be present with that frequency and realize that is energy building in my body that's bringing me into a place of manifestation power because I'm present with what's there. And then I can actually, in the parasympathetic, stay attuned to it and use that energy and channel and harness it for my creation power versus running from it in that fight or flight sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to is also like to answer Ryan's question around like what's a sign you need healing. It's like I always very simply see it as like anytime we feel like we need to fix or change something is like an opportunity for healing. And not because we need to fix or change something, but the healing is actually in the presence and the acceptance of what is. And cultivating that deeper self-compassion and self-love to allow ourselves to be held exactly where we are. And from that place, the transformation and the evolution naturally take place. Because we are designed to evolve. We are designed to transform. And so if we allow ourselves to be where we are and we can embrace and accept that, the healing happens spontaneously.
Yeah, it's like that awareness, acceptance, surrender, process. It really just is rinse and repeat to that, and doesn't make it necessarily easy, but the more that you do it, at least speaking for myself, and I imagine you guys too, the more that you do it, it still, to me, doesn't make much logical sense, right? But then again, what even is logic and why do we need everything to make logical, quote unquote, sense? Like if I need to make eggs, okay, logic might help, but when it comes to emotions, there's not much logic that's going to be there, and that's fine. Right. And thank goodness, because the logical mind is sometimes full of a lot of stuff. And, that's what I've got pulled down into many, many times before, especially, Matt, you were talking about, creating businesses and, finance and all this stuff. And yeah, that's like a wormhole for me that my logical mind can get stuck in and my ego can get stuck in. And, something I love that both you guys were talking about is this process of, non-judgment, right? Like not casting, judgment on an emotional state or a feeling, right? That we're then attaching a story to that, well, this state is good, this one is not good, right? Like that's been one of the biggest aha moments for me. I went through a program called Training Camp for the Soul last year. And it was beautiful, it's just being with what is and, feeling your feelings. And, a question that I'm really curious to ask you guys, because this is something I've struggled with is, I've been for a lot of my life, I would say since my father passed about 8 years ago, I've been very mind heavy. And I feel as though that's been a protection mechanism of some sort to stop me from feeling what's in there. Hence why it came out, when I was able to relinquish the ego and get deeper into my body on mushrooms. And, I'm curious because I imagine there's some people listening that may be going through this. Like, what do you say to those people who are like, oh, I don't feel anything in my body? Like I might feel, tight muscles or something like that, but I don't necessarily feel anything that I would consider like uncomfortable or bad. Like what I imagine might be happening is they're too much in their mind. So if you work with a client like that, like what's your typical approach, or have you seen that, or have you experienced it yourselves?
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, just to bring us back into spiral cymatics, our modality, when we work with the mental space, we talk about through the whole body, there are these energy centers, and there's the disempowered expression and the empowered expression of them. And within the mind, when we're in the disempowered place, we're actually in that logic or that intellect. And when we can move through that, what we get to is intuition, right? It's like that innate wisdom that we all possess. And we are so conditioned in our society to be in the mind. We literally have organizations set up with hierarchy saying like the brain, the mind is like the top thing that we should listen to. It knows all. Nothing else matters, right?
Yes.
So we have that, which is traumatizing, period. And then if you experience literally anything in your body as trauma, it disconnects you from sensation and feeling. So you go into the mind as a way to protect yourself, right? We learn that very, very early on. And it can be something as simple as like you stub your toe and it hurts, so you go into the mental space. Or you experience like a really big trauma, like you're beaten by your parents, or you have sexual abuse, or something that brings you out of the body as a way to protect you. And, I think both of our journeys have been very much about dropping back into physical body, which is why I brought that up earlier, because that's, I think, especially with psychedelics, a piece that often can get forgotten, because psychedelics are up the mind.
Yes.
If you do the integration work, they bring you back into the body, but that piece is really key and essential. And so what we see a lot with our clients is you can feel when someone shoots into the head, because that's the safe space. And there are really clear patterns, right? I'm repeating myself. I'm trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. I'm talking faster. I'm not breathing, whatever those things are. And as a listener or a space holder, you can feel that in your own being when that starts to happen, right? And so a lot of what we do is we just pause, we breathe, and then we actually bring someone into, what do you feel in your body? And look for sensation. And one of the things I always say is like, numbness is also a sensation. So if you're not feeling anything, that's also a signal. And so how can we work with that? And we really unpack kind of the deeper layers of like, with that sensation, what's there? Yeah. And the more curiosity we can all bring to the process, the more the body can actually reveal to us about what's ready to be felt and to be released. And I guess the one thing I would just say on that, which is really fascinating, is like when the body is presenting something to us, right? Like a pain, a tight muscle, right? Is actually like, there's information in that.
Yeah.
Discomfort, numbness, whatever. We are ready to process and feel. The nervous system is actually presenting that to us in a way that's saying like, it's okay to experience this now. You're resourced, or you have the tools, or you're in this safe space that you need. And so that's like, the body is ready to actually clear the thing.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in, to speak to that indifference, it's kind of indifference. It's kind of like non-sensation. When I was young, I went to a private school, and like literally everything that happened, you got paddled for. And so like, I remember there being like, that year I was paddled like 30 times. And over time, you really dissociate from your body, because in that experience, it's near impossible to stay embodied. And so, I remember watching my middle child, someone like hit her, and she goes, "That didn't hurt." And it's this way of like staying out of the body because you don't want to feel the pain that you're feeling. And so indifference is a sensation. And I would say like a big part also of in that healing process is a lot of times we're very towards our trauma, and meaning like we actually find ourselves in these trauma loops. And when we actually are anchoring to our purpose, then instead of actually going into that trauma over and over and over again, we're actually anchoring to what we want to create in the world and what our purpose is. And then once we anchor to purpose, then we can actually move through what comes up. Otherwise, we're just in this loop, moving through it again and again, and essentially picking the scab and rewounding ourselves. And so I found myself for a long time in this place where I was like going through this rejection wound of being in 7th grade and like kids picking on me and me being made fun of and not having any friends. And it's kind of like this metaphor of like when you're standing still, all God can do is knock you down. But then when you begin walking, he can guide you left or right. The same thing is true. And what we really anchor into with the modality is, what are you wanting to create? And then what's holding you back? Because when you actually can anchor into what you want to create, then the trauma or the wound doesn't become the end goal of your healing. Actually, what you're trying to move towards becomes the end goal, and you begin to move through the things that are standing in the way, the friction that's standing in the way to flow. And we talk about a lot of times like flow being, it's kind of mischaracterized, right? Like flow can often be looked at as problem trance, which is like running from our own problems, versus like when we actually are in that true state of flow, we're in this place where we're edging like 5 to 10% difficulty, where it's not too easy, it's not too hard, and we're actually moving through the friction that's standing in the way of what we want to create.
That's beautiful. And, like I had this visual come to me of basically like, like you were talking about when you're anchored to your purpose, it's easier, or maybe easier is not the right word, but for lack of a better term in this moment, easier to be able to move through your challenges because you know where you're going. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, that's 100% what I'm saying, because you have somewhere to go versus if
Yes.
there's nowhere that you're going towards the very thing that you don't want to be stuck in.
Yes. Yes. And, I feel as though, in my own case, for a long time, obviously I was unaware that I am the creator of my reality and all of those things. And, I'm big on language work, and it's something I work a lot with my clients with. And, just the way that people frame a lot of the things, that classic example of, if you ask someone what they don't want, they'll give you a whole list. But if you ask them what they do want, they very rarely have a list. I mean, that was my case, right? And so being able to actually change, like looking at what you do want or running towards what you want rather than running away from what you don't want. I mean, it all makes so much sense to me. And, I'm curious, sex is such a sacred act, and it's such a beautiful opportunity to connect deeper and to become present and to see yourself mirrored back in another person. And I'm curious for you guys, how does this spiral cymatics, include or help with intimacy and sex? Like, I'd love to get into that subject now, these juicy details.
Yeah, I would say that it's a big part of its presence, right? So holding space for the other person and being willing to be present with what comes up. And we do a lot around conscious communication for couples as well. And it's really being willing to just be there in the moment and hold space for what comes up in the other person. And then also there's a powerful practice of using that energy to actually manifest what you want. I mean, that is that life force energy, right? And that sacred practice into what you're talking about. I was telling, we're moving like towards purpose instead of towards the wounding. And like, what is that practice that we really get into?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Because it's such a deep and rich process that's there. So what I always like to presence first is like our sexual energy is our creative power. Like it's the place from which we can create life, right? And it's like this very like base human thing. It's like sex equals life. So if we work with our sexuality, we really do stand in that role of creator more and more. So that kind of being the first thing, like if we can learn to consciously work with that and harness that, then really unlimited possibilities are available to us. And it's a reconnection to our divinity, remembering that part of ourselves, or remembering ourselves as that. And then we've touched on this quite a bit through this conversation, but when we're in a sexual situation, what you're experiencing is a lot of sensation, right?
Yes.
And that can be extremely pleasurable to the point that, sometimes our nervous system can't handle the amount of pleasure we're experiencing. So that's oftentimes like when a release will happen or something like that, because the system's overloading, right?
Yeah.
We also can experience painful sensation through sex. And I think for women in particular, that happens maybe more, right?
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, but I think it happens on both sides. And learning how to remain present with sensation in a sexual situation is a really great teacher for how to remain present with sensation as we're moving through our healing towards our purpose, as we're moving through trauma towards creation, right? And there's this other piece that I think is really important for both parties, and this is where the intimacy work really comes in for us, is like knowing yourself so deeply and trusting yourself so deeply that you're able to communicate vulnerably like what you want and what you need in a given moment, right? And that matters in bed and it matters and also like boundaries come into that, like really clear boundaries. It's like a friend shared with me that boundaries teach people how to love you better. And I think that goes across the board, right? It's like, hey, in bed, like I feel comfortable going to this point, but I'm not ready for this yet, right? Or in my business, I feel comfortable receiving this amount of money, but I'm not ready for like this level of wealth yet.
Yeah.
And like learning where our own edges are. We talk about this concept of edging your way to success, which is finding in Tantra, they talk about it as the resilient edge of resistance. So where is the place in your body where you can feel the most sensation without overwhelming your circuits and then shutting down into that like fight or flight response?
Yeah.
And how can you play with that edge? Because the more that you play at that edge, the more you actually have expansion.
Yes.
And you continue to open and open and open to receive more, to experience more, to be present with more.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was really young, I was asking my dad about masturbation, and he was like, I was like, is it a sin? Can I do it? And he was like, you're fine as long as you don't like imagine a naked woman, and as long as you don't release. And really, like, what's left?
Yeah. You're like, you took all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
So for me, like a big part of my process was like, well, if I can't release, not feeling the pleasure, right? And so actually avoiding feeling the pleasure. And so a big part of like my sex life growing up was like actually trying to keep myself from releasing, because I was in this place of like having to do math in the head to keep myself from feeling what was going on in the body. And I was doing like complex, like calculus equations, trying to keep myself from feeling it just so I could quote unquote please the girl.
Yeah.
And really like that comes back to that being present with the sensation that's in the body. And when you're not present with that sensation, it automatically kicks you into that fight, flight, freeze, or ignore. And really like you can ignore something only so long before then it takes control of your body. So in that place, you're either going to run or you're going to release. And so like, if you want to actually have sovereignty over your own body, you do have to become present to that sensation. And one of the big practices with us is actually like, I mean, being allowed to like just release. And I know that sounds like simple, but it's like, I would be asking the question, like, have you orgasmed? Have you orgasmed enough? And she's like, who cares? Like, are you experiencing pleasure? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, how deep and how rich can you feel that pleasure? And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And like, as I began to feel that pleasure and given myself permission to say, yes, I deserve to feel that, I've actually come to the place where it's like, I can feel that more and over again, because sex is really a microcosm of the macrocosm, because like everything mirrors itself in reality. So you can watch how someone is in the bedroom or monitor how that, like, is it a one and done? Well, then you probably also treat your customers in that same way. It's like you're going to get the money from them and there's not a continual relationship. Is it about just like being quickly releasing? Well, you're probably not having that much presence anywhere else in your life. And so we really use it as a ceremony for looking at and observing all other areas of life.
I love that.
We weave the sacred sexuality with, we talk about it as conscious creation, but really with entrepreneurship, because they map together so beautifully. And there's this reprogramming that's happening, I think, across the board for so many people, and is really held in like tantric tradition and like Taoism as well. There's a lot of sexual practice there around like releasing the chasing of orgasm, right? And like cultivating and feeling worthy and deserving of the pleasure along the way. And like allowing that to be enough, like feeling the depth, feeling the expansion. And we talk about it with business is like, that leads you into like multi-orgasmic business, multi-orgasmic expression, where instead of like racing to the top, right, or chasing society's ideal of success and then achieving it and then feeling deflated because you've released all this energy, it's like, you continue to expand and open and unfold. And it's funny because as I'm saying this, it's like the vision I'm having is how a lot of psychedelics look, right? Where there's like that blossoming visual that happens where it's like expansion, expansion, expansion. It's like that's what's possible when we map sexuality over creation and really allow them to inform one another.
Yeah, I would say I really believe that we're meant to experience orgasmic sensation in the body at every single moment. That when we came out, or like when we were first created, like that was what we experienced. And then as we were in the womb, we began to experience the ancestral trauma or the things that were happening during that pregnancy period. And then during the like birth, I mean, we just become more and more a part of our parents' environment or the environment that we grow up in. But in the truest fashion, our bodies are meant to be sensation machines that literally guide our intuition towards what we're trying to create and our purpose for why we're here. And we can exist in that orgasmic state in not just our cock or in our yoni, but literally in our entire being.
Whole being, yeah. So orgasm is really just like that release of energy, right? So like Barbara Carrella is one of the Tantra teachers I've studied with. Like she talks about giggle-gasms. Cry-gasms, right? Like you were sharing that mushroom trip and it's like you cried and cried and cried for an hour. Like that was an orgasmic experience, right?
Yes.
And it's like that full body, like, yes, like what you're saying, you know. It's fascinating because sorry, we had a little delay.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say my buddy Angelo calls it face coming, you know, when you cry. And it's just so funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, what's coming to me through this is like how the psychedelic experience really teaches us how to be in that full body orgasm. I have like 20 things I want to say right now. So in our work, we focus a lot on flow. Which we also talk about as play, as kind of this like alchemical space between control on one side of the pendulum and surrender on the other side of the pendulum. And you were speaking to like those experiences where you take psychedelics and then you like pressure yourself to act normal.
Yes.
Like no one can know, right? Like that's the control end.
Yes.
And what we're all afraid of is that we're going to have that forced surrender where we're like the weird person who completely loses their mind what everybody's looking at, right? And it's like, what's that middle space where we allow ourselves to like surrender the control so we can be in the flow and be in the play and like enjoy the experience, right? Have that full-bodied orgasm. And I'm pregnant right now, and
congratulations!
Along, thank you. So the baby's like he's growing a lot, like my body's changing a lot, and I experienced this past weekend the first what they call. I hate the name because it's like some male doctor from the 1800s, but a Braxton Hicks contraction, which is literally like one of the ways that a woman's body prepares her for the birth process is like you get to have the experience of like a contraction or some contractions ahead of the labor process, right?
Yeah. It primes you.
It was so fucking intense. And I was like, the day before I was in the creek here and I got this just really clear message, like your birth is going to be like an ayahuasca journey and you're going to experience what you call death, like that full surrender to the sensation basically so that you can open and allow this portal to happen. Right. And then I had this like mini experience where I was like, I've never been in this much pain before. There's so much constriction in my body. I want to control the experience and all I can do is surrender and breathe. And then as soon as I did that, right, it like transformed and really opened so much of my body, but also like my spirit. Like it was this huge shift. And it reminded me a lot of, I worked with 5-MeO-DMT with the Bufo alvaris toad.
Yes, I love that medicine.
Super beautiful.
Yeah.
But I had basically like, I was with a friend who facilitated, and she gave me like the first dose. And I went into this like beautiful space where like the toad grabbed me by the hand and like took me to the beginning of creation and like showed me like, kind of how it all happened. And it was like so profound. And I come back and like the world is piecing itself back together. And I'm like, not in my body yet. And she's like, I want to give you more. And I'm like, are you crazy? Like, no, somehow I like get myself to stand up. I take more. And basically my experience in that was like, I went into the most extreme fear and like gripping and controlling and like trying to hold on for dear life, like did not want to let go. And when I finally did, right, like through the breath and through the medicine, just kind of going like, let go, let go, let go. What ended up happening was like I lost control of my body, right? So my jaw, which had been holding, 33 years of tension, starts like wiggling uncontrollably. My tongue's moving back and forth. And I'm like conscious of everything that's happening without having any control over what's happening.
Yeah.
And then I start like writhing on the ground and like literally doing like somersaults. And I'm just like completely out of control. And like having a lot of shame come up because I'm realizing that like these two friends are watching this happen, and it's like horrifying and also so liberating. And then I calm down and just start laughing hysterically. And I start coming back, and it's like every exclamation in the book, I'm like, holy shit. Oh my God, Jesus Christ.
Just what just happened?
laughing. And I'm like, when can I do that again?
Let's go again.
Yeah, like I just got birthed back through the cosmic yoni, and I'm here.
Yeah.
And like the reason all of this is coming through is because it's taking me back to this concept of like the full body orgasm and like living in that space. And like that is what's available to us when we choose to let go and surrender and find that really beautiful balance point where we're in flow with life and in flow with ourselves and really our highest expression and purpose.
I love that. And it's so funny you mentioned 5-MeO. I've had the opportunity to work with that medicine a few times now. And the first time was amazing. The second time made the first time look like child's play. I did not know. Yeah. I did not know how much farther down that rabbit hole it was possible to go. And I mean, you talk about pure bliss, right? Like, I mean, and honestly, 5-MeO makes MDMA look again like child's play. Like it's just like, oh, you think that feels good? Try this, right? And I've also definitely like the second time was much more I was trying to control, and luckily the facilitator caught it and was able to use some word magic to just release that control. You're safe to feel this, this is you're okay. And I was able to surrender and let go. And there was some singing bowls guiding me too, which the first thing my ego / my language center, whatever it was able to attach onto when I came back in, I thought this was so funny, was Tesla was right. Like everything is sound and vibration, like, I don't know, I can't quantify because it's not quantifiable. It's a quality, but wherever and whatever that sound was and where it took me, I mean, it was my roadmap to the beginning of time and then back into my body. That's all I know. And it's funny that, for me, that's what LSD is now, is pure. Like you guys actually just helped me put words to this, because for a long time, I would enjoy mushrooms, and LSD was always just kind of strange for me. Again, probably because I was doing it at music festivals and trying to convince myself that I had to be normal. But when I was able to finally, what I call get LSD, it was about 3 years ago, and I was around the right group of people for the first time. And by right, I just mean people that were on a very similar path as me. And I felt comfortable that like, yeah, even if you end up on the floor laughing like a silly goose, like you're going to be fine. Like no one's going to judge you. So, after that, I was able to go from control into surrender. And now I call LSD laughter medicine. It's like when I really want to like laughtergasm, like it's LSD that I take. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever done breath work while on LSD or mushrooms, or I imagine some other medicines too. 5-MeO, it's like I would never want to try breath work on that. But I don't hear this talked about enough. But if you're on a nice dose of LSD and you do a quick 10 count breath with a hold and squeeze, I mean, you will blast off and go into full body orgasm. I mean, especially with MDMA. If you interact with breath work on MDMA, it will literally give you a feeling where every fiber of your being is orgasming. You're like, I don't even know what to do with this information. Like, it honestly doesn't even feel like it's like, there's this intuitive thought I get when I go through those experiences, whether it's with mushrooms or LSD or MDMA, where there's this funny thought I get where a part of me, my higher self, whatever you want to call it, is like, he figured out that button, like we're never getting him back now. And I'm curious, like, have you guys experimented with that before, like breath work and breath work in general, right? And I think for a lot of people that maybe aren't ready for psychedelics and maybe might not ever be ready for psychedelics, breath work can be a good way to kind of have your cake and eat it too, and experience some of this bliss without actually having to, put a substance into their body. What's your guys, opinions or experience with breath work?
Yeah, I would say like I was doing it this morning.
Yeah.
And was just in a meditative state, and there's no better way to find clarity in a normal everyday period than like being in meditation and bringing yourself into presence with your own breath and like paying attention to the sensation in your body and feeling it and allowing that to guide you and direct you back to your intuition. And something you were saying a second ago about when you were in that experience with the 5-MeO and the person was like kind of bringing you back. That's such a powerful like place to be in because literally everything that we're talking about is really about going from that hurt to healing. Yes. And in that hurt, it's like, I've been myself before. And when I was myself, I got picked on or made fun of. I was seen as weird. I was rejected for being me. And so if I be me, I'm not going to fit into the paradigm of society. And what we do is hold space for you to be the most authentic version of yourself.
We celebrate the weird.
We celebrate. And it's
I love you guys.
Powerful. It's like in that situation you're like talking about is like, you just needed permission to be you.
Yes.
And it's really important that like when working with someone that you're in a place of like where the person that you're working with is looking and able to like be aware of what the polarity and the tension that they're feeling about what you're going through. Because when someone hasn't completely healed from what they're holding space for, they're going to shut down your expression because they're triggered by the very thing that you're experiencing. Versus when you're in a space where someone has done the healing and they're non-polarized to what you're going through, then whatever it is that you're expressing and healing from, the other person is just sitting there holding space and saying, yeah, you got this. You be you. You do your thing no matter how weird it is. And that's actually what the healing is I see myself, I love myself, and I honor that part of myself that I've rejected and then was reflected in the world back to me as rejection. And I can accept that part of myself and therefore feel that acceptance in what I manifest from here on forward.
Yes. That was beautifully stated. And, I'm curious for you guys, I imagine there's a lot of people listening to this. I mean, hell, I'm thinking about this too right now. I imagine there's a lot of people listening to this who are excited to go in deeper with you guys and are looking to potentially work with you. Who is your ideal client that you work with? Like, what kind of people you're looking for? Are there any, prerequisites or anything like that you would suggest people have before they come to you? Like, explain a little bit about that, because I feel as though, what you guys are touching on is resonating very highly with me. And I imagine it will with a lot of the guests as well. So I'm excited to jump into that.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for asking.
Yeah.
It's funny because contrary to sort of what all entrepreneurial advice would say, Like, we really believe that everyone is our client.
Yes.
And we love working with people in all different stages of their journeys, right? Like from the very beginning of like, I'm just starting to tap into this like awakening process or spirituality, to people who've like been on the path for a long time and are looking for like, what is next here? How do I go deeper or integrate this more? And so I think that kind of is like a pretty broad spectrum, but the qualities that we really like look for and what works well when we're working with someone is a readiness from people. Like they're ready for the transformation, they're ready for the healing, and they're really ready to move through so that they can move towards what they truly want. So as Matt said earlier, you know, we don't anchor to the healing, we don't fixate on that. We recognize that as this necessary process that gets us into the new world, that gets us towards purpose, that gets us towards the life that we want to create. It's people who are ready for that process, like do really well in our programs and in our one-on-one work. And in addition to that readiness, there's like the commitment to self, really is what it is. You know, It's not commitment to the work. It's not commitment to us. It's not commitment to doing X number of hours a week in a program. It's like a deep commitment to self. I love myself. I know my worth and my value, and I'm ready to like make a commitment to show up for that. So that works very well. I think, you know, we've had a lot of out there experiences and tons of journey work and like many different access points to transformation, to healing, to creation. But we also are really like grounded and really in our bodies. We do a lot of ceremonial work, earth connection work. Like, you know, we can go way out into the cosmos, but then we can like really be like bare feet in the dirt kind of people too. So in that way, like there's a translation that can happen, right? Like we speak many different languages. So like, I think that's a gift we both share, is like being able to meet people where they are and relate to people where they are from that space of like non-judgment and really holding that like everything is okay. Everything's perfect. Everything's beautiful. You know?
Say that we work with couples. We work with entrepreneurs. We work with entrepreneurs on the beginning of their journey, like at later stages in their journey, trying to like build a business.
We work with leaders,
and really there's not like, so the reason we're saying there's not an archetype, because it's less about where someone is and more about the readiness that they are willing to look within and actually be willing to like manifest, is what I like to say, is are you willing to anchor yourself to what you want to create and then bring that thing within you? And when someone's actually willing to be present and feel the things that are coming up, it's not about like a certain, we're in the, our expertise is trusting your intuition.
Yes.
That's our next training.
Well,
we have a training coming up on September. We have a training coming up on September 22nd, called Trust Your Intuition. It's literally for anyone and everyone. It's $111. And you can find that on our Instagram and our website, which is THEE, so the.love.
We're on Instagram as Matt and Maggie, though.
Yeah, on Instagram is Matt_and_Maggie.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I would say that like we work with everyone, and we love like the opportunity to hold space for people to just be their weird selves, because I mean, we've all been in that space of like, I know we're wrapping up here, but a big part of my journey was like actually going to the place of psychosis and literally having to let go of what anyone would think of me and being rejected by a lot of different groups. And then me realizing that for me to actually grow and evolve, that I was going to have to be willing to let go of those current friends and those current relationships that I had so that I could evolve and become my most ideal self. So like we've been to the place of weird, and moved through weird and come back to reality. And we welcome people to step into the weirdness.
Yeah.
I feel as though this is not our first lifetime meeting because you guys are amazing. And, I've had so much fun with this. And what I see with you guys is this scale of relatability, right? You've had so many experiences that, you have now a scale that you can relate on, right? There's so many different people you can work with because you've experienced so many different things and you've been in so many different mindsets, so many different stages of your life. And that's beautiful. To me, that's the makings of masters right there. People that understand a broad range of experiences and are able to actually articulate that and help people move through those various stages, and I agree with you guys that, a lot of times I get so frustrated because everyone's like niche down. And I'm like, I like a lot of different types of people though, and it's such a challenge. And, I'm just so excited we got to do this today, guys. And, I'm curious. I know you guys already listed the Instagram and the website and the next course, but is there anything else you guys would like to share that you have coming up or any, program dates or anything or any other ways people can get in touch with you?
Yeah. Matt mentioned we have a training. It's a 2-hour training called Trust Your Intuition on September 22nd. And then we have a 3-month training called the Erotic Entrepreneur that really is weaving sacred sexuality and conscious creation. And that's happening starting in October. And we also have a retreat happening here in Sedona in October that we're still finalizing dates for. And then we have a courageous communication training and really all about like cultivating intimacy and how to express authentically and receive others in that space as well. And we offer some one-on-one work too. So we don't take a lot of clients on at a time because we, as you hear,
yeah, you guys got a lot of
training. But yeah, we love working either one-on-one or with couples in a 2-on-2 container. To really explore deeply whatever is present. And like we were just talking about, there's such a range of what we love, what we've experienced, what we are able to hold space for. And so for people who are really wanting that like high touch and deeply intuitively led experience, the one-on-one containers are potent. And right now, our Instagram is the best way to get in touch with us. You can actually message us there, and then we can kind of share from that space because, it's easier to have a conversation and then find, a way to guide and direct what might be the best way to work together.
Yeah. And again, that's like Matt_and_Maggie. So
I love that.
That's where we're at.
Guys, this has been so much fun. And I have one last question for you. If you guys are up for it, what do you say?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I knew you guys would say yes, but I still like asking. It adds to the whole flair of it, And so the question is this. If someone listening was just swayed by both of you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what piece of advice would you relay to them to give them the smoothest experience possible?
I would say be aware of the ceremony. And we talk about that in without psychedelics, is that like once you've done psychedelics, it becomes a part of your life and is just something that you experience. I went and got my nose pierced the other day, my septum, and my mom made a comment before I headed out the door, like, are you going to be able to get any clients and have business if you get your, if you look like a tribal Indian bull. And I got in there.
She literally said that.
That's amazing.
So we got in there and I was in complete panic, complete shutdown. And the guy was like, hey, I hold space for people's biggest fears to arise. And I'm like sitting there in this place of like completely shut down. Maybe I'm not supposed to do this. And Maggie's like, he's not in his body. And so she starts asking me questions and I slowly come back. And I like came to this place of just like actually having to surrender and come back into what I actually want. And I think like to ease that integration and to be in that space of like, hey, something is going to come up. The ego is there. And to just be aware of that is the process of life. And that is the ceremony. And it's not just something that happens here. You're just, as you were saying, tuning your awareness to what the frequency of life is. And so the more that you can come into the practice of ceremony, the more that you actually can become present and move through an experience like psychedelics.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I would say my advice is surrender, breathe, breathe
Very important.
Trust yourself. Really trust yourself. Trust the choice you made. Trust your heart. Trust your soul. Trust your spirit. Trust your highest expression. Like, trust the choice and enjoy the ride.
That is amazing advice, guys. I feel like I just met a new soul brother and soul sister. It's nice to meet you in this lifetime, because apparently, I'd be silly to think this is I'd be silly to think this is our first time meeting, and guys, as I stated,
and also silly to think it would be our last, because we now have the whole Clubhouse rabbit hole to crawl down together.
Yes, exactly. I am so excited to hear what happens with your guys' podcast, to dive into Clubhouse together. I mean, we just need bunk beds now, to pull out a Step Brothers reference, Did we just become best friends? Yup.
Seal the deal.
Yeah. It's actually funny. I'll have to put you in touch with my girlfriend. She's actually hosting a retreat in Sedona in like 2 weeks. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And she would love you guys and you would love her. She's way down the same rabbit holes we went down today. And we just met someone else who lived in Sedona too. So it's funny. We're getting called to Sedona quite a bit. And, I'm definitely getting the bug, if you will, to head down there myself.
Well, connect us with her and come visit. Come sleep in the bunk bed.
Yes, definitely. As I stated in the intro, the ability for plant medicines and psychedelics to assist our erotic experiences and give us all the opportunity to level up the governor on what amount of pleasure we feel is possible for us in our lives is paramount. Matt and Maggie do an amazing job of being able to speak on both subjects and intertwine them into an easy to follow, intimate experience. And if you listen to this episode and felt called to dive in deeper to their work and discover all the pleasure and intimacy you have been missing out on, then please take it from me and reach out to them to begin leveling up your experience of intimacy, pleasure, and all the other fun subjects we chatted about today on the show. Matt, Maggie, thank you so much once again for stopping by to share your time, wisdom, and knowledge with us today. And until next time, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.